Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Stone Belt ARC's webinar, Road to Worship, Transportation as a Primary Barrier to Belonging. Usually I have guest speakers for anybody who is new to these webinars. Usually I have guest speakers, but today I am the speaker. So you all will hear from me on this topic. This specifically is a topic that I've spent the last 3 years focusing on in my doctorate work, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment. But to take care of just a few things, for those of you who are new, this is, I do put on these webinars. I am your host, Reverend Sarah Vanderzee McKenney. I am the Spiritual Support Coordinator for Stone Belt ARC. For those of you who may not know who Stone Belt is, we are a nonprofit service provider that offers a wide range of support services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as neurodivergent folks. We are located in Bloomington, Indiana, Bedford, Indiana, and Columbus, Indiana. So we serve people in kind of the south central region of Indiana. We are also a secular organization. Therefore, we strive to offer spiritual support to people of any and all faith and spiritual practices. We are also a community-based organization. So this means we promote full integration, inclusion, and belonging of people with disabilities in their community. Now, before we dive in, I want to bring your attention to just a few more things. I am putting in chat now 2 links. In those links, you will see one, a donation site. We offer all of these webinars for free. Typically, we bring in guest speakers, and we do offer them just a little donation from us to them. But we do provide this to you all for free. So please consider making a donation today so that helps with us bringing in quality speakers. You will also see on that page, or on that chat, you will also see a link to our website. So on the spiritual support page of our website, you will see all past webinars in this webinar series this year in 2023. We have one more in November where we will have people with disabilities that will be sharing stories of belonging predominantly in their faith communities. So please check that out in November. But all past webinars of this year and past years, we've been doing this, I think, 3 years now. So all of those past webinars are also found on that website. So you can also go to that link that you saw there in the chat section. All right, I think that covers most of that. Using Zoom. I know each time we get on Zoom, there's slightly different settings depending on who is running things. So you will notice on this webinar, your microphone is muted. This is to help with as much strength with audibility. So please, you'll notice, yes, your microphone is muted. You can use the chat icon. Please enter in your comments. Feel free to enter in who you are, what you're doing here, what's your job, where you're from, if you choose to use that for networking. So don't hesitate to drop those messages at any time and say hi. You can also use the Q&A option. So you'll see that 2 little kind of chat boxes or icons, and it says Q&A. Please feel free to enter in your questions throughout. There will be a Q&A time. I will reserve some time at the end to also answer any questions. So yeah, but feel free to type those in. And then also you will notice that closed captioning is available. So you should be able to turn that on at the bottom of your screen. You should see a CC icon, and you can turn that on as well. All right. I'm going to introduce myself today. For those, again, who don't know me, I'm Sarah McKenney. I have a Master's of Divinity. I earned that in 2012. I am the Spiritual Support Coordinator for Stonebelt ARC. I support people with intellectual developmental disabilities, as well as neurodivergent adults, in exploring what their spiritual needs are and making sure that those are met in their community. I developed the spiritual support program in cooperation with Stonebelt in 2017, and we're still kind of learning and growing and expanding and figuring things out as we go. I am a member of the Presbyterians for Disability Concerns Network and their mother nonprofit, Presbyterian Health, Education, and Welfare Association. So we work on a variety of different topics within the Presbyterian Church USA denomination. I am also vice president of the board of directors of Fallen Walls Ministry. This ministry is led by Daniel Aaron Harris, Dr. Daniel Aaron Harris, and this ministry is for people with disabilities in ministerial leadership. And so it's a kind of a support group, clergy group, who help to support one another, and kind of a way to express maybe our frustrations or just kind of that shared experience of disability. I mentioned that I'm ordained within the Presbyterian Church USA, although I support people of any and all faith traditions. I'm currently in my Doctorate of Ministry program in Disability and Ministry Studies. It's the first of its kind at Western Theological Seminary. Anybody else is interested, there's going to be another cohort. So let me answer any questions if you're interested in that. And finally, I am a person with a disability myself, and I have the experience of dyslexia and ADHD. So, hello, guys, really without further ado, let's just dive in. Like I said, this is predominantly the focus of my doctoral research, largely because this is what I've experienced as being the primary barrier when I work with people with intellectual developmental disabilities. This has repeatedly become the largest barrier to them attending their faith community of choice. So we're going to kind of dive into why this is an issue and kind of parse all of these things out. And then we're going to end with, I have a few suggestions, a few recommendations in kind of from a variety of different standpoints. Suggestions for faith communities, suggestions for service providers, and suggestions for individuals with disabilities themselves and their families. Again, I'm going to be sharing and dumping a ton of information, so bear with me, but please don't hesitate to email me after. I'd love to spend any time with any of you on kind of parsing this out further. So like I said, transportation is one of the primary, if not the primary access barrier for many, not all, many people with intellectual developmental disabilities. It is true, and what I mean by that is some people with IBD do drive themselves. So I do not want to start that misunderstanding, that misconception. Some people with IBD are able, and do drive. Okay. So this barrier is true for the community at large, but also any community activity. So what I mean by that is transportation can be a barrier to just access anywhere in the community that a person wants to participate in or get to. So grocery store, any type of activity in the community, so on. But it also can mean a very specific community activity like worship, a congregational picnic, book clubs. So it can mean like large spectrum access, but also very individual, small community access. And so, like I said, this is also true then for faith communities as well, a giant barrier. So before we kind of look at why, I also want to look at this through this lens. So this, for those of you who do not know, this is the belonging wheel. This is created by Dr. Eric Carter. He wrote a book, and I'm not going to be able, oh, I did find it. He wrote a book including people with disabilities in faith communities. And a lot of his work has been built around kind of parsing out what belonging is, and how does one kind of achieve, what are the steps one goes through to achieve belonging. So just real quick, first, one has to be present. You have to be able to get there, right? You also being invited in. You know, when you're a part of kind of a set community, it can be hard to kind of to be let in. So being invited, once you're there, feeling welcomed. It is very common experience for people with and without disabilities to come in, attend worship, and leave, and nobody's spoken to them because nobody knows them. They haven't been welcomed. It's kind of a tight-knit community, and so nobody's even said hello and welcomed the person coming in. Then the next step is feeling like you're known. So getting to know one another, getting to know what their interests are, what their likes, what their dislikes are, actually getting to know the person. Then moving into acceptance. Now that you're knowing the person, you may not agree with them, but you accept them. Supported, now you're starting to relate. Now your relationship's moving into a role of sharing support. So now you're kind of getting a little bit more connected and personal. Same with cared for. But then now with befriended, in the befriended stage, now you're moving from being supported or supporting somebody into a reciprocal, mutual relationship. I'm not always the one being cared for or supported, but I'm also now sharing with you what my gifts are. I'm supporting you. I'm sharing my gifts. We are now building a mutual friendship or relationship. And then needed. So kind of that next natural phase is now that we're having more of an interpersonal connection. Now I might also have special roles in the faith community. I might help reading scripture. I might be a greeter. You're starting to learn what my gifts are. And now I'm not just an attendee, but I'm helping to lead. I might be in the committees or the team meetings. So now you're a needed member of the congregation. And then finally, loved. So the reason I want to parse this out is because I have found that this has a huge understanding, this has a huge influence on if transportation is provided. And we'll come back to that. But I did kind of want to set the tone with this belonging wheel. Okay. Now we're going to dive into the kind of nitty gritty. So again, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. So from the angle of, so now we're going to talk about people with disabilities. What are transportation barriers from the perspective of people with disabilities. So, and all of this is built off of conversations I've had, just situations that I've been made aware of here at Stonebelt, but also in other agencies and service providers. So talking to my colleagues, this information has been collected through assessments, surveys, lots of different ways of information. So many people with IDD are unable to drive. So we've talked about that as one issue. So I want to spend some time talking about bus systems and those limitations. Bus systems can be great. In Bloomington, I'll spend a little bit of time kind of explaining Bloomington because it's a pretty good bus system, but I also want to point out some of the flaws that I don't think a lot of people realize. So maybe we're almost looking at kind of the ideal bus situation, but I'm going to point out why it's not quite ideal. So we have our main, in Bloomington, Indiana, we have our main bus system, and it's a good one. It goes to many places within the city. And we even have a rural bus system as well. Even the buses are wheelchair accessible. They actually lower to help people with wheelchairs wheel on to the bus. So they're even wheelchair accessible. The problem with that is that you have to be able to get to the bus station. So the buses don't pull up to your door. You have to be able to you have to be able to access the bus system or the bus stops. So, and our sidewalks, they've done a huge amount of projects to make our sidewalks more accessible and all of that. But that can still be inaccessible for so many people. Walking 3 blocks may not seem like a big deal, but for some people it is. It's too much, especially to do that independently without any support staff. We also have a disability specific bus. So this you actually have to apply for. And I think it and you do have to pay. I think Medicaid can pay for some of it. I'm not sure, but you do have to apply for it. And I think they are limited to how many they can bus passes they can pass out because of the limitation of bus drivers. So the disability specific bus will actually pull up to your door and then take you where you need to be to that door. So if I want to go to the grocery store, they would, pick me up at my door and then they take me to the grocery store. So the issue with this, wonderful, love it, yay Bloomington. Okay, so now everyday logistics, this is why it can be an issue and prohibiting. So life is not always planned out. To use this bus system, you have to plan at least 24 hours in advance to set up to request this ride. Okay, so you need at least 24 hours in advance, and you have to I don't remember the hours for declining. So like if you want to switch your schedule or give notice that you need to cancel your ride, it's still hours to cancel it. So I'll explain to you why this may not work. Well, first of all, not everybody's lives are that planned out, right? Sometimes when we go to our faith community, say I'm going to synagogue, I show up there, I start hanging out and chatting with friends. They all invite me. We all decide to go out to breakfast before heading home. Guess what? I can't do that because that would be a change in schedule and I don't have advance notice. So that would not be able to, even to cancel, you get flagged for how often you cancel without doing it in the time frame, and then you can actually lose your bus privileges. So life does not happen this planned out, right? It doesn't leave room for normal social interaction. Helps in for a lot of things that we can plan out, doesn't help in some of these kind of things that come up in life, right? I could go and give you lots more examples, but I think you will hopefully get the gist. Okay. So again, it just can lack the flexibility of the natural flow of life. So now we're going to look at it from direct support professionals. So for those of you who don't know this term, DSP stands for direct support professionals. I think some states use slightly different lingo, but it's those who are the caregivers, who are employed and work to support people with intellectual developmental disabilities. So DSPs all over the country are chronically short-staffed. That is, in my surveys, that was the number one issue. And so what I mean by that is, if you have just two people living in a house, one person wants to go to temple, the other person doesn't, and you only have one staff, that individual cannot go to temple because they can't both agree. So immediately you get into logistic issues. We have some people who don't need support staff around the clock. They can have time to themselves and independence. So they may not even have staff to then provide that, especially when you're chronically short-staffed. They're usually the ones that sadly get pulled on their staff most often. So they often will not have the staff flexibility to be able to go take them. The other thing is, and this came up in lots of conversations that I've also had, is that DSPs expressed a challenge when they are of a different faith tradition themselves, and taking somebody else to their faith community of choice. Many of them recognize that it's their job. They know that they're supposed to take them, but it is highly uncomfortable. And to some of them, it even connects to past trauma, and it provides a heightened sense of anxiety, and even sometimes further trauma. So again, I understand, and I'll be truthful, a part of me is like, it's your job, suck it up. But the reality is our DSPs don't have the professional, a lot of them don't have the professional training and development to know how to do this well. It's not just don't be sensitive. You have to be trained to do that. And it does take some professional training to acknowledge one's own beliefs and be able to sit there and not be super triggered and let that affect how you support the person next to you. So there really is just this lack of professional training, and the DSPs will be the ones to claim it and say, I'm not prepared. Like I said, for some DSPs, there is real religious trauma in their past. And so we don't want to be too quick to dismiss that or minimize that either. DSPs have also communicated to me that like I said, that they have just kind of a lack of knowledge of different faith traditions and their language. And so they even feel maybe ill-equipped to be kind of an advocate or be comfortable in that space. DSPs have also said that, like I said, they feel unprepared, untrained to support people in those types of environments. An example of this is even when the faith community, maybe there's that one congregant that comes up and says something, because it happens. All it takes is one congregant to come up to the person with a disability, say something that's hurtful, and it does not mean that the whole congregation thinks or feels that way, but a lot of our DSPs are not necessarily trained to deal with that conflict, know what to say. And so that again provides a lot of anxiety in those situations. And then DSPs also just have a discomfort in unknown spaces. And then sometimes, I hate to say this, but sometimes DSPs are even targeted or focused on when they take a person to a faith community. So it has happened that faith communities have focused on the DSP and what faith tradition the DSP is, and making sure that they become a member. And that can also not only be uncomfortable, but that's not why they're there. So again, a lot more to say, but I feel like that helps to sum things up, and I want to keep moving. So faith communities. Faith communities communicate. I did a wide variety of different assessments from a wide variety of different faith traditions, and this was the feedback that I got. They felt like that they had just a lack of process for transportation requests. Some didn't even know that, a lot of them didn't even know that this was an issue or this was a need. And then they didn't have really a good process to even deal with transportation requests. And I feel like some of you are probably nodding right now, knowing that, yeah, your congregation does not have really a process for this. And that also that there's a real anxiety and fear from congregants. Many people who are over the age of 40 haven't socialized with people with IDD. They weren't in their classrooms. And so they don't have a lot of experience. And so because of that, that can grow fear and anxiety because of the unknown, because of what they're not used to. This also can lead to stigma, misconceived notions, and misunderstanding of what and who people with IDD are, what they need, what they don't need, what they want. Some just simply don't know how to engage and have a conversation, even though I just tell them, just talk to them, say hi, introduce yourself, and start a conversation. But the anxiety and fear of not knowing what to do can stand in the way of people just being themselves, being their natural, authentic self. And there is no special language that you need to use, just be yourself. But the anxiety, the fear of not doing that, of it being unfamiliar, can get in the way. Right, wrong, that's just the reality. And then people also feel overwhelmed by just a regular commitment. So this is very logistical. So some people just feel overwhelmed by saying, yes, sign me up to take that person every Sunday or every Friday or Saturday or whenever you meet. People feel overwhelmed by that. They feel like that's a big commitment. How many of us plan to go and then last minute we're like, nope, not today. It happens. So sometimes people feel overwhelmed by the commitment of doing it every week. And then bottom line, sometimes it's just not a priority for a congregation. And I get that. I do see Michael, yes, I can definitely, you all will get a PDF copy of all of these slides, okay? I will send a follow-up email with a PDF version of these slides and any other information along with like my email, so you all know how to contact me. All right. So now I want to just point out some, in case you're a numbers person, sometimes this helps, right? So just to kind of parse this out a little bit. So I'm going to focus in on a very small group of people, the very few people that I interviewed and surveyed that actually are able to attend their faith community 100% of the time. Well, 100% of the time that they want to go. So again, small group of people. Out of that 100% out of that group of people that are able to attend 100% of the time, 57% were fellow congregants who took them, who helped with transportation. So 57%. The other 43% were family members. Okay, and this is going to make a lot of sense when we go back to our belonging wheel. But 0% of the time are direct support, are transported by direct support professionals. So this does not mean that no direct support professionals are taking people to their faith community. That's not what I'm saying. It means out of the people who are able to attend 100% of the time, 0% of that are DSPs. So DSPs are not able to take them 100% of the time because of all those issues that we talked about, because of being chronically short-staffed, because of having subs who are doing their best to be there and figure things out once they're there, much less, figure out everybody's personal calendars. Because you're dealing with all of those things that we talked about with DSPs. Okay. That I do not want to say DSPs are bad, but this is how inconsistent they are able to do this because of those issues that we named. Okay. So I really like to uplift and focus on the perspectives of people with disabilities. So I'm going to go back to what they said in these surveys. From people with disabilities, they presumed that some of the biggest barriers are no consistent transportation. 38% named that. 11% said that they don't feel welcome, and that's a big barrier because they don't want to. It provides lack of enthusiasm. So 11% did name that they just don't feel welcome, and that's a barrier. 22% said that they didn't know that attending was even an option. And again, that's not totally at the fault of DSPs. That's not what I'm saying. This means that people, again, this may not be surprising to a lot of you. People with IDD are not often encouraged to have their own beliefs because they don't think that they can, or people are kind of afraid of having that conversation for a variety of reasons. So 22% said, I didn't even know that this was an option. And then 27% was other, and there was lots of different kind of things in the other section. So all of this information led to some reflections. DSPs cannot be the primary solution for getting people to faith communities. DSPs are wonderful. They are predominantly trained to help people with medications, regular caregiving in the home, and many other things, but they're not really trained to do some of this professional, some of the things that take more professional development. So not a lot of, so right now, DSPs and, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. I will also say, and with the issue of such a lack of DSPs, the staffing crisis, it can't be a primary issue or a primary solution because we just don't have the people. Okay, So people in a congregation will provide transportation and support, but they need to know the person. They need to feel comfortable with the person, and they have to have that trusted relationship. Sound familiar? The belonging wheel? Okay. So my hypothesis is the further along a person is on the belonging wheel, the more inclined, willing, and able the congregation is to support someone with transportation. So I guess that makes sense, right? So some further issues that I have then with that is, how do people who don't belong get transportation, right? If you're new to a congregation and you haven't developed that relationship, well, how do I get transportation? Because I can't work around the belonging wheel until I'm there making those relationships. And then so this is the gap that's then missing. And then how do we address this from all sides? I'm a big proponent of, you have an issue and you got to kind of come at it from all sides in order for long-term change to actually occur. It's working within the whole system to try and work on the issue. Okay, so here's that belonging wheel again. So congregants who have one thing I found was really interesting is that congregants who have been long-term members of a congregation and they become disabled, the congregation jumps in. They often jump in and help with transportation. I'm not saying that it's not an issue, because I know some of you are like, oh, we're trying to always get our folks here. But it is much easier to get transportation for those long-standing members who already belong in that community. It's far easier to get them transportation. People are far more willing to do that. So if you don't already belong in the congregation, it's then a struggle to get transportation. So there are a variety of things that I then want to recommend. So I'm going to spend some time kind of looking at what I recommend for congregations, families, and individuals. And then I'm also going to spend some time showing you what I'm working on for service providers as well. So for congregations, I will say this recommendation in particular is predominantly for those Christian traditions, just because that's the realm I'm doing my doctorate in. But I am doing some look at liturgical theology and just reframing this time in the car. What happens in the car? The car doesn't have to, the transportation and the time in the car does not just have to be this menial logistical detail that needs to be checked off of your list. Instead, it really is a beautiful opportunity to access spiritual practices, to get to know one another, to grow relationships, opportunities of even empowerment, learning about each other, growing with each other, and building a beautiful mutual relationship with one another. So I'm going to be spending some time looking at liturgy in action, so practical liturgy, and how what that can look like in the time in the car. I'm not going to be hashing that out in this time, mainly because I'm still doing work on that. But that is, so I'm still kind of focused in on that part of my thesis, and still mulling over that. So I don't have that for you today. But just kind of telling you kind of some of the things that I'm thinking about. Okay, so the other thing that I'd love for you all to do, those of you who are coming, I know a lot of you are coming from different organizations or individuals who are coming to this webinar with different perspectives, and so those of you who are in a part of a congregation, I really, really, really encourage you, clergy, preach on this. Those of you who are, I encourage you to tell your congregations to teach about this. Just that education. Remember, congregants, the feedback from congregants was saying, I didn't even know this was an issue. I just figured the bus system was fine. So educate your congregation. Just let them know why this is such an issue. Help people understand that when somebody asks for a ride, it's not that they can just do it themselves or figure it out themselves. Do an assessment. So I encourage you, I have assessments that I can give you. Shoot me an email. I'll put my email in there. I can even include some, I'll include some in the follow-up email. But there are some simple ways to assess the needs of the people in your congregation. And I encourage you to do this in a variety of ways, because the more ways, the more formats that you tell people that they can communicate to you your need, the more willing people are able to give that to you. So have an announcement during the service that if people need help with transportation or access, please let such and such a person know. Have it be a form that's available on a resource table. Have it be on your website, in your bulletin, just a variety of different ways. People with disabilities, they often are, can be reluctant to request for help because they've done it before and they've been disappointed. So having a variety of different ways for people to communicate their needs really helps them say that you mean it and that you're serious about it and we've really thought about it. And then who receives requests? So if you make these forms, you better have the rest of the procedure, okay? If you can tell, I'm Presbyterian, procedures. So if you have the request form, who is going to receive the request? Who is going to receive the forms and process that? Who are the people that you're going to call upon? Do you have a team, a transportation team? Do you have volunteers? Just a call list? Whatever way your congregation operates, make sure that you already have that group of people that you're going to call upon that are ready. And then time turnover. Set a goal as to how quickly you can get requests received and then served. If you set a goal, that will help you try and keep that going and stay true to that. And then communicate back to the person who sent the request. So don't leave them hanging. Let them know that you are working on it and when you are hoping to get them back to them by. So if I call on Friday and you give me a call back saying you've gotten the request, say it on the next Monday, you've gotten the request, they're going to look for it, and your goal is is to get back to me in 2 weeks or 1 week. Be clear on what that communication goal is, and then do it. Okay, so actually having a procedure sounds ridiculously simple, but having an actual formal procedure will help make sure that the congregation and the employees of the congregation or volunteers stick to this procedure. Okay. Service providers. I've got a couple things for you. I am piloting a new program, and I'll tell you all about it and how it goes as we try it out. So Indiana Bureau of Disability Services gave us a grant for a variety of things for our whole spiritual support program, which includes end-of-life support and stuff like that. But part of the grant is to also hash out this pilot. And shout out to my spiritual engagement coaches, Jupiter and Woody, who I think are on this call. They are doing the brave duty of piloting this program. So this program, our hope is that this will actually become a Medicaid waiver service. It is not promised, it is not guaranteed, but that is our hope. So what this would do is our spiritual engagement coaches would have a caseload of people, and they would one-on-one first help them do self-exploration, helping to empower people with disabilities to explore who they are, what's most meaningful in their life, and what their spiritual needs are. Second step is to do discovery of the community. What is even in the community? What are the different faith traditions? What are the different community hubs? And how do my spiritual needs fit with what's in the community, and vice versa? Once you've found that community, they will then move to step 3, which is growing relationships in that said community. So building, again, working around that belonging wheel, right? So building relationships, starting to learn about people, building that mutual friendship. And then 4 is actually fading out. The spiritual engagement coach will fade out their support, and the faith community, as a natural support, will continue to support that individual, provide them with transportation and any other support that they may need. So again, our hope is that this becomes a Medicaid waiver service. Cross your fingers, pray, send positive vibes. But we will be testing this out until March 2025, and then we'll see what happens. The other thing that I want to say before we do Q&A is, for service providers, we need to help educate our DSPs, because I think they can do this. I think that they can. I don't want to not empower them to do this. We need to, the importance of supporting people, we need to let them know about the importance of supporting people with IDD in their spiritual needs. And spiritual needs are not just a woo-woo extra thing. It's about being those core aspects of our life that are really important to us. And that might be different for each person. And then professional development to equip DSPs to grow professional boundaries, to learn how to separate their own beliefs from somebody else's, helping them to deal with triggers, because these are real. These are not going to go away, and people are not just going to figure it out. We need to help them to do that professional growth as well. And then also just learning professional coping skills and strategies and mindful techniques. I even use them to this day. If there's a stressful situation, making sure that I go take a moment to, pass it all out, brush it all off, get in a different mindset. We all use coping strategies, and the more people can learn how to use them, the better it really will help our DSPs, not just in this, but it will really help them in many other situations that are stressful, and really help support our DSPs and equip them to do their job well. So that's all I've got for you today. So now I'm gonna start our Q&A. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box. I will even look at my attendees list. So if the typing out your question is not accessible and you need to verbalize your question, you should, hopefully you do, you should have a hand raise icon. I hope you do. I hope that was turned on. But that is also an option for you. Okay, I've got Jill says, many churches include vulnerable adults in their children and youth, safety policies and procedures. Ours would then require 2 people to transport. It's the right thing to provide protection for both drivers and the individual, but it makes it even harder to find people who will provide transportation. Very true. And you might even look at not this. I would say this is not going to be everybody's policy. Different people need different supports. So make sure you're getting to know the person with the disability and what support they need, because they may not need 2 drivers. They may and you may have drivers that have that you know better and can make those trusted connections. Some people do driving record background checks. There's kind of a variety of ways to do that. Lauren, hi Lauren, says, I hate to have to ask this, but have to run across what happens when the church insurance by officially providing these types of services. So one thing I think I'm gonna answer this honestly. I think sometimes we because I don't want to say it's not important to think about insurance, protection, stuff like that. We definitely need to do that. However, if my friend needs a ride somewhere, I'm not having them fill out a waiver before they get into my car. So I also don't want us to overthink these policies when this is somebody that just needs to get to church or to their faith community. So I also don't want to overthink that. If your church is formally, so I talk to your insurance groups, but I also don't want to stand in the way of people needing to get there. And like I said, when my friend needs a ride somewhere, I don't have them sign a waiver before they come into my car. So I don't want that to stand too much in the way and be too much of a barrier for access. I was just told that 2 drivers were required. That may be your congregation's policy. That may be your congregation's policy. That I would think that that's more so for children. But again, you are talking about adults. Yes, they have intellectual developmental disabilities, but they are adults. So I encourage you to work with the individual with the disability, work with their family or service provider, see if that is needed, how comfortable are they, and have that open conversation. I'd hesitate for the congregation to make those decisions themselves without having conversation with the people with disabilities and maybe their family or service providers, because they may say it's okay. We're okay with that. I am equipped to communicate my needs or whatever the case may be. So I encourage you to have those conversations with a variety of team members. Anything else? Do I need to clarify any of my answers? Protection policies are good. I just don't want them to be a barrier, and for us to overthink it too much or over prepare, because then it can be prohibiting. And it may not be needed. Again, talking with, we don't want to be ableist in our policies. We don't want to set policies because it's what I think you need for your protection. That's we want to be very careful about that. But letting people with disabilities being a part of those policies. Some people may say that no, one person's fine and I'm comfortable with that. Other people may say, in fact, I have an individual, she says, I want a female driver. That was her conversation with her congregant. She said, I'm okay with one person driving me, but I want it to be a female. And so that was part of that's part of their transportation plan. So having that open conversation is really important. Try not to set policies without those people with disabilities. Any other questions? If you have other questions, but you want to have, oh, I have something else. Wow, I love how you have linked the belonging wheel to access to transportation. Thanks, Evelyn. Christopher, we're talking about starting a group transportation for the church, not just one individual. Great plan, Christopher. Yep, having a group of people, group transportation is a way to kind of work around that, whether that's a van or a bus or a kind of a larger vehicles. Great, absolutely great option. Absolutely. Christina, do you recommend a person-centered transportation plan for each person instead of a blanket policy? Yes. Yes, because the needs of people with disabilities are such a wide variety. Some people do have more communication barriers, and so it would be harder for them to stand up for themselves. Other people feel like they can do that and are confident and are really good self-advocators. So one policy is going to be, the risk of one policy to fit everybody is, again, especially if a person with a disability is not involved with that policy, is you are likely working off of stigma and misconceived notions of people with disabilities. You're working off of presumed potential issues versus actually talking to the people and what's most important. The other thing is there are a lot of those of you who work in a service provider world, you'll know this phrase. We call it dignity of risk. And people with disabilities are some people with disabilities are far more willing to take that risk in order to live their life. They know that just like the rest of us, the world is a very risky and sometimes scary place, but it can also be loving and joyful and many other things. And so they're willing to take the risk and be vulnerable because they want to live their life. I'm a big proponent of person-centered transportation plan, and I can actually put that in the email. I can come up at least with a starting plan, which includes a support plan, largely that is actually based off of Eric Carter's. He actually has a person-centered plan in his book that I've kind of tweaked. So I can send that in the email. Definitely. Christopher, yeah, a bus can be very helpful. Any other questions? I know these are very real concerns. I get it. This is why it's become such a barrier. Anything else? Well, thank you all. Thank you all for listening to all of this. I will send an email, a follow-up email. It will take a while for this to get on our website. It is live and recorded on Facebook, so you can go there. But it'll take a little bit to get onto our website. Before that happens, I will be sure to email you with all of these slides. I will also be sure to send you some, maybe some helpful resources, but please email me. I'm actually going to put my email in case you get to me before I email you. Please email me, and we can even set up, if you have more in-depth questions, I'm happy to set up Zoom calls and chat more. Thank you all for coming. Blessings.